The stage is set in Maine. Democratic former state lawmaker Troy Jackson will face off against longtime Republican incumbent Susan Collins for the U.S. Senate this November, a race that could be a key factor in Democrats' chances of taking back the Senate majority. And yesterday, in an interview with MS Now's Chris Jackson, he pointed to the issues he believes will set him apart from Collins.
I've been fighting for universal health care, prescription drug coverage. I mean, I'm a big labor person. I don't believe in income tax cuts for wealthy people. I don't believe in ICE should come to Maine or any other state and create the chaos and hate and discontent and murder people. I mean, these are huge differences between me and Senator Collins. And that's why I think people are going to vote for me, because they want somebody that has their back instead of the wealthy elite.
That was the Senate candidate, now the Democratic nominee Troy Jackson, with MS Now's own Chris Jackson. And also joining us is Kirby Wilson, politics editor of the Portland Press-Herald. Kirby, it's good to see you again. I think we just saw you, right? Just yesterday, 24 hours. So I think my question with you, I want to start with the Democratic strategy in the race. It seems to me that they are consistently pointing to a key stat, which is that Susan Collins has voted with Donald Trump 96% of the time. What was notable to me when preparing for this segment, I ran across your own polling about a month ago, which found that Donald Trump was underwater, I think, 21 points in Maine. So I think my question for you is that connecting, Trump to Collins to Trump, is that type of message, is that resonating with voters, or are they still sorting through the debris of the Plattner withdrawal?
Well, I think no matter who the Democratic candidate is, the Democrats were going to hope to tie Senator Collins to President Trump. The two stats that you cited are actually really interesting because Senator Collins has voted with Trump 19 out of 20 times statistically, but that's actually sort of on the lower end of how often Republican senators vote with the president. So you can kind of spin that number either way, right? Like Senator Collins could say, well, I'm actually one of the more moderate Republicans for voting even that percentage of the time. And as far as the other statistic about the, about polling and stuff, she's with Trump's numbers, he's significantly underwater, but he's not more underwater than he is nationally. So he's not especially unpopular in Maine. Now, I think both of those things could change. And that polling was done before the ICE officer killed a man, a 25-year-old man in Biddeford about 10 days ago. So I think the more national flare-ups there are, the more between now and Election Day, the more opportunities Democrats will have to tie Senator Collins to the Trump administration. And so, and if they're able to do so, I think they're in good shape.
I mean, Senator Collins is always concerned, so maybe that works out in her favor. There's also some polling from University of New Hampshire that I thought was really interesting, Kirby. Jackson seems to have a slight edge over Collins among voters, 49% to 46%. We can see there that's just a 3% change. And the 2.9% is the margin of error. So basically it is a tied race at this point. But he's also way more popular among voters 18 to 34, 67% to her 30%. And when you take both of those things, one, is 3 points enough for him at this point based on how much he overperforms polls every single time? I think the shift from Sarah Gideon to her in polling and when it actually came out in November was double digits. And how likely is it that he's able to galvanize these young voters in a way that's actually really, really helpful for him here?
I think there's a great chance he's going to do well with young voters. And in fact, Maine had the second highest turnout in 2024 among young voters. But the problem in Maine is there's just not that many of them. Maine is statistically the oldest state in the country. And this campaign battle is largely going to be fought on the airwaves, trying to reach older voters via traditional media means, TV, newspapers, radio. So I think there's a great chance that State Senator Jackson can galvanize young voters. I'm just not sure it's going to make up for the margins that you pointed to. That I think the interesting thing to point to in that University of New Hampshire poll is the Democratic candidate for governor is running 14, 16 points better than her Republican opponent. Jackson is running 3 points better than Collins. To me, that implies the existence of a lot of Democratic voters for governor and Republican voters for senator. They're voting for both at the same time. If Jackson can cut down on the number of those voters, I think he'll do a lot better. You saw it in 2020. Sarah Gideon lost by 9 points the same year that President Biden won by 9 points.
Kirby, I'm wondering if you can sort of give us a vibe check of the room yesterday, because obviously the sampling of people who were there is not necessarily reflective of the entire Maine electorate. It's a very keyed in, up-to-date, high propensity group of people. But nevertheless, they are reflective of some of that excitement that we have been seeing all along here. And in that vibe check, a little bit more specifically, what were the issues that you heard from your conversations with these delegates, the people that were participating in this process yesterday? And, does that align with the priorities and the platform that we saw Troy Jackson put out yesterday, according to his campaign?
So we put out a policy survey for all of the candidates who ran for Senate in this truncated, less than 2 week process. And we found that there was almost no daylight between the candidates on key issues. Medicare for all, abolishing ICE, their stance on Israel. It was all very similar. So when you get 600 plugged-in Democrats in Maine in a room, they're going to agree a lot on policy. The difference in the candidates is both how they present and also how they plan to attack Senator Collins. And I think you saw some key differences there between Jackson and his predecessor, Graham Plattner, who withdrew from the race. Plattner attacked Collins a lot on personal terms. She's personally corrupt, he said. She's part of the system of Congress that enriches members instead of, the everyday workers, everyday people. And Jackson, although there was a flavor of that to what he said, he's focusing a lot more on the policy stuff and trying to tie her to Donald Trump. Now, Plattner did that as well, but I think Jackson is leaning a lot more heavily toward that end of things. And I think voters are probably going to respond a little bit more to how the national environment plays out here, as opposed to attacking Senator Collins in personal terms, because Collins has been around for 30 years, right? Like, people in Maine know her, and they don't see her as corrupt. They just don't.
Kirby Wilson, so knowledgeable. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And we will continue to have our eyes on Maine and have you come back to explain it all. So thank you for coming back to the weekend.